someone who put it very well. It may have been Melville. He said that the great American theme was space. We've always wandered in this space.
Bobby thumbed a diesel down just before it rained.
Anybody who's written a song like Bobby McGee is at home in that space. Understands it. Understands the beauty of it, the majesty of it, the spiritualness of it, and the loneliness of it, the utter loneliness of it. In my estimation, the best poetry has always come from one's first response to nature. I don't think that you have truly great poetry without some very deep, essential connection to the land, to nature. I think that Kris has that. He brings a poet sensitivity, albeit his form of poetry are lyrics.
He's a poet, he's a picker, he's a prophet, he's a pusher, he's a pilgrim and a preacher, and a problem when he's stoned. He's a walking contradiction, partly truth and partly fiction, taking every wrong direction on his lonely way back home.
Some of the lyrics that he has written are as much a poetic evocation of the spirit of the American landscape as some of our best poetry. He's a poet who has responded to the American experience.
He has tasted good and evil in your bedrooms and your bars. He's traded in tomorrow for today, running from his devil's lord and reaching for the stars, and losing all he loved along the way. But if this world keeps right on turning, for the better or the worse, and all he ever gets is older and around, from the rocking of the cradle to the rolling of the hearse, the going up was worth the coming down. He's a poet, he's a liar, he's a prophet, he's a dreamer, he's a pilgrim and a preacher, and a problem when he's stoned. He's a walking contradiction, partly truth and mostly fiction, taking every wrong direction on his lonely way back home.
When you look at the face of poets, you don't see a typical face. You see that they've seen so much. You see a face that's witnessed a lot. You see a face which has looked life in the eye, so to speak. Every great poet has conveyed that. It's in the eyes. It's something that's undeniable. It's not something that one can hide. I think that's what you see in this face of the poet.
Look at that old photograph. Is it really you? Smiling like a baby full of dreams. Smiling ain't so easy now. Some are coming true. Nothing simple as it seems. But I guess you count your blessings with the problem that you're dealing with today. Like the changing of the season, ain't you come a long way? Ain't you come a long way down this old road?
Going on the road is really Kris's life, because that's what he is, wandering through time, having this adventure after this adventure. He's been doing it now since he was a kid. I'm sure he's been a million miles on one of them buses. But the object is to, like Willie sings, on the road again, making music with my friends, just a band of gypsies. That's kind of how it is.
You have to understand, I was coming from a real conservative background. We're a military family. My father was Major General, 2 stars, you know. In the Air Force, he had served in the Second World War in the Army Air Corps, and then in Korea. He gave me a sense of duty and a sense of living up to who I should be, you know. And so I feel like sometimes I even have conversations with him. I've quoted him.
The man said there's 4 rules. Tell the truth, sing with passion, work with laughter, love with heart. Storm on the mountain, stars in the sky, running for glory, freedom to fly. Will you remember way down the road somebody loves you more than you know?
On top of that, I had all the baggage that being a Rhodes Scholar carries with you. The expectation is that you mustn't waste all this stuff that was given to you, you know, all this opportunity for education, and that I should at least try to be Secretary of State or something, you know, instead of a bum, which is what I was. I went to Nashville on leave.
First morning in Nashville, after the first night, we stayed up all night with Jack Clement, Mary John, and Merle Kilgore, and at some point in the morning, Cowboy Jack Clement and I were over in Audrey Williams' building, and Doug Kershaw was trying to sell the Cowboy the publishing rights to Louisiana Man, and Jack should have bought him that night. But then he brought me over here. He told me about how he got on trains and he'd ride them down to New Orleans and just turn around and come back and write songs, or go up to Baltimore or something. It was already a symbol of past glory.
I visited a relative of a friend of mine in the Army, my platoon leader. Donald Kelsey was his name, and it was Mary John Wilkin, who happened to be a publisher and a songwriter, and she was like an institution there. And she showed me around.
Hello, I'm Johnny Cash.
The first time I went to the Opry was with Mary John. I was in uniform, and I saw Johnny Cash, and it took my breath away.
I hear the train a-comin', it's rolling around a bend, and I ain't seen the sunshine since I don't know when. I'm stuck in Folsom Prison, and time keeps dragging on. But that train keeps rolling on down the San Antonio. When I was just a baby, my mama told me, son, always be a good boy, don't ever play with guns. But I shot a man in Reno just to watch him die.
He was the most exciting looking performer. He was skinny as a snake. He was wearing all black.
Just like I am right now, with except with longer sideburns and longer hair. Rockabilly from Memphis with the pompadour and the grease and everything.
And he was as wired and electrically wired up as anybody I'd ever seen. He took more pills than Roger did, and he was just barely in control.
I was killing myself on amphetamines. Yeah, he was right about that.
But he was the most driven,
gifted, exhilarating, and self-destructive artist that I'd seen. And I wanted to be exactly like him. I was going to have to hustle to go out like Hank Williams because I was already 29. But I thought it was the function to burn and not rust.
Kris let me read a letter from his mother in the studio one day, not long after I met him. And the letter, in so many words, said, "You are disowned. You're no longer my son. You gave up, you're a Rhodes Scholar, you gave up your education, your career, everything else that was planned for you, and you've gone to Nashville to be a bum and hang out, try to be like people like Johnny Cash and Hank Williams, and don't ever darken my door again."
Just 2 streets, and that was it. That is it. That's I think. God, I'm so certain, but that looks so much like my house and the area I lived in. Nashville was a real Rubicon in my life. It was a point when everything changed, when they tore down the one that I guess it was like Joseph Campbell talks about following your bliss. You know, I think that's what I did when I went to Nashville. Now that's my house.
This was the first place I came to Nashville. This was Buckhorn Music, Mary John's place. And later on, it was Combine Music. It was Bob Beckham's place, and I worked for both of them. Over there was my house, or the apartment I lived, the very last one down at the end. It looked much worse at the time. But they restored it. I think they restored everything in it. But it was, that was my house. And then the Tally Ho Tavern was right over on the other side of the road, right at that corner, on the caddy corner. And the Professional Club was right across the street there. That was the other bar. So you'd go between the Tally Ho and the Professional Club, and you'd see all the people that hung out. Full of songwriters. And this was it. This was Music Row, right here.
He walked in my office one day and said, "I understand you like my work." And I said, "I sure do." And I said, "I'd love for you to write for me. What do you need?" And he had a boy, Christo, that was in the hospital at Vanderbilt over here. And he needed some money. So, got him some money, and then he started writing. He was flying helicopters for a week down in the Gulf for an oil company. And then he'd drive back to Nashville and write.
One day, Bob Beckham, who managed Combine, and called me and said there was a writer that needed a little more draw per week than was customary, and could he bring him out? And he did. And they walked into my office in Hendersonville, and the right sole of Chris's boot was flopping. All the stitches had come out, the brads or whatever. And I thought, well, here's a fellow that's not doing too well, you can see. And I asked him if he'd sing 3 or 4 songs. And he said he would. So he was quite nervous. Like he was auditioning for his big gig, I guess. And he sang 4 great songs. To Beat the Devil, Jody and the Kid, Duvalier's Dream, and The Best of All Possible Worlds. Knocking me out. So I said, well, I'll tell you, I'll okay your draw on one condition. And he said, what's that? I said that you'll agree to do the album for Monument. He said, you want me to sing? I said, I do. He said, man, I can't sing. I sound like a fucking frog. I said, yeah, but a frog that can communicate, because you've sold me. And that's how we started.
The songwriters would come by here maybe in the afternoon. By that time, you'd got up. And everybody was like family. It was Billy Swan, and all these. Billy got me the job over there at Columbia when he quit.
So I was going out the front door, and as I was opening it from one side, Kris was opening it from the other, and he says, "Hey, do you know where I can get a job?" And I said, "Yeah, I just quit mine." And Harold said, "If you know anybody looking for a job, bring them in to me or send them to me." So we went back into Harold's office, and Kris ended up getting the job.
He'd come in with a broom or mop in his hand, but he'd come right to the studio or the control room and start sweeping up dust while we were recording. And he slipped his tape to June, and after we left there that night, she said, this guy, Kris Kristofferson, that's working as a janitor, gave me a tape to give to you. So I didn't think anything about it. Took it on home, put it with a big pile of others that had been given to me. And I got in a habit of, after a few weeks of accumulating all these tapes that I didn't ask for, I'd throw them in a lake, because the bedroom overlooked Old Hickory Lake. And I think I was guilty of throwing some of Chris's songs in the lake. I don't remember what particular songs I did, but since then I'm sure I've heard copies of all of them. But that was the way he got his songs to artists, or the way he got them to me. I finally listened. I really listened, because one afternoon he was flying a National Guard helicopter and he landed in my yard. I was taking a nap, and June said, some fool has landed a helicopter in our yard. They'd been coming from the lake, from the road, now they're coming from the sky. So I went out, and here comes Kris kind of stumbling out of a National Guard Army helicopter with a beer in one hand and a tape in the other.
I dig Bobby Dylan, and I dig Johnny Cash, and I think Waylon Jennings is a table thumping smash. Hearing Joni Mitchell feels as good as smoking grass. If you don't like Hank Williams, honey, you can kiss my ass.
Okay, this is one of the few things that are recognizable from that time. It's the old Bradley studio, or Studio B is what it was called when I was working here, and mostly the country acts would work here. The Lefty Frizzell, George Jones, John cut down there. And then they started moving up into Studio A, where the people like Simon and Garfunkel and the Byrds and Bob Dylan were recording. And there isn't even an inside of Studio A anymore, or a studio in here anymore. These old bricks probably soaked up a few of those old tones coming out of there, but you'd think they'd want to make a shrine, because there were so many great country artists.
One day I got a call from him asking for an appointment. So he came out, and he said, I can't write anymore. The well has gone dry. I said, that's ridiculous. He said, well, nevertheless, it's true. I can't, I've tried, man. I'm just taking your money. You need to drop me. And of course, I didn't want to drop him. I still believed every bit as much, and maybe even more than I had at the first. So I said, there must be something troubling you, If you want to tell me about it, we'll see if we can solve it. And finally, he admitted that he'd been through this very fallow period, I believe, is a good way to put it, where he had not had any income to speak of, and the bills, of course, kept going. And he was in debt. He said, more money than there is in the world, I owe that much at least. And so we arranged to fix that. And in no time, he brought in standards, helped me make it through the night. And me and Bobby McGee, and Sunday Morning Coming Down.
That was where I wrote Sunday Morning Coming Down, up in this place up here. And if you can imagine this place on a Sunday, when all the music stuff is not going on, and the bars aren't even open till 1, it's more of a family day than it is a singles day. So Sunday Morning Coming Down, if you can look around, you can see how easy it would be to write it. You hear that bird?
I woke up Sunday morning, no way to hold my head, it didn't hurt. The beer I had for breakfast wasn't bad, so I had one more for dessert.
Then I fumbled through my closet for my clothes, found my cleaner's dirty shirt. Had a picture of Leonard Peltier on it. Washed my face and combed my hair, stumbled down the stairs to meet the date. I'd smoked my brain the night before on cigarettes and songs that I've been picking. But I lit my first, watched a small kid cussing at a can that he was kicking. Then I crossed the empty street, caught the Sunday smell of someone frying chicken. And it took me back to something that I'd lost somehow, somewhere along the way. On the Sunday morning sidewalk, wishing, Lord, that I was stoned. 'Cause there's something in a Sunday makes the body feel alone. There ain't nothing short of dying, half as lonesome as it sounds. On the sleeping city sidewalk, Sunday morning coming down.
So the coming down was down that very staircase, Chris, was it?
Yeah, the part about going down the stairs to meet the day was the coming down was out there. I probably never written that song if I hadn't heard Mickey right over across the way over there. We used to go into Beckham's office, and they'd sit around and pick songs.
You would sit around. They had what they call guitar pulls, where you would sit around and pass the guitar around in a circle. You had to play 2 songs, no more and no less. You couldn't just play your most favorite new blockbuster song and then pass the guitar off smugly. You had to follow it with another song.
Those guys started that whole deal of a guitar pull. They're just sitting around somebody's apartment with a couple of 6-packs, and you pass a guitar around and hear everybody's latest ideas, you know, and also you're kind of trying to beat the other guy.
It was what we did. It was the way we spent our time, and we fed off each other. And I would hear what they had written, and they would hear what I had written, and we would compare. And then we'd brag on each other's songs, and this is what, songwriters, young or old, that's what you need, is to be able to get some good positive feedback.
I like this song so much, and I don't know if he appreciates this or not, but I like this song so much, I would take some of them off and not let anybody else hear them, because I wanted them to be my songs.
There's a demo around here someplace where he and where Kris and Billy Swan put down the original demo. Me and Bobby McGee. It was both about half drunk, I think. It was about 3 in the morning. But for what it was a classic. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Busted flat in Baton Rouge, heading for the trains, feeling nearly faded as my jeans. Bobby thumbed the diesel down just before it rained. Took us all the way to New Orleans. I took my harpoon out of my dirty red bandana and was blowing sad while Bobby sang the blues. With them windshield wipers slapping time and Bobby clapping hands, we finally sang up every song that driver knew.
I came back late at night after coming back from Louisiana, and Billy Swan was the only one over there, and we went into this they had a studio down the bottom floor that was just like a room, small room with an organ in there, and Billy played the organ, and I played the guitar, and we laid our voices over in harmony and did Bobby McGee all night long. At the end of the night, Billy says, This is a religious experience, like Hey Jude. God bless Billy.
He and I did a lot of his demos on some of his songs, like being Bobby McGee, and helped me make it through the night in the little demo studio that Combine Music had. They had 2 mono machines. And he'd come in and sit down and sing it, and then I'd maybe put an organ on it, and then we'd put some harmony or a little background on it, and that was it.
We were doing those la-las just like Hey Jude. We did them forever, just over and over again. It's probably the best we ever recorded it, because I never did it in a way that I was satisfied with to this day.
There's certain songs like that for certain songwriters that it seems like the world was waiting with bated breath for a song like that. And everybody recognized the song. They looked the song in the eye when they first heard it, whether by Kris or Janis or Ramblin' Jack Elliott. They looked at the song looked at them, and we've been walking down the street ever since.
The real Bobby McGee was a secretary for Boodle O'Brien named Bobby McKee, and Fred Foster got the idea for writing the song, me and Bobby McKee. And the real Bobby McGee, though, is probably closer to Giulietta Messina from La Strada, Fellini's movie that really changed my life when I saw it. It affected me very strongly, and the feeling at the end of La Strada is the feeling that inspired Bobby McGee of the double-edged nature of freedom, of the pain of the loss, which is almost equal to the pleasure of what it was that you had. William Blake was such an inspiration for me, because he was a great example of a courageous artist. He said, if he who's organized by the divine for spiritual communion refuse and bury his talent in the earth, even though he should want natural bread, sorrow and desperation will pursue him throughout life, and after death, shame and confusion of face to eternity. So he had a moral responsibility to communicate spiritually.
I said one day, Kris, why don't you come on in? We'll do one session. We'll do one song. If you don't like it, I'll burn the tape. It's history. We'll forget about it. You can just write. He said, okay. So he came in, and he chose his song To Beat the Devil because, it's half recitation.
Kris wrote a song called To Beat the Devil, and he tells the story himself that he met me in the hall at the studio in Nashville, and I was in really bad shape. I think he said I looked like a black snake. And he said he looked into my face and saw that I was dying, and he wondered why. That really gave me pause for thought to hear Kris say that publicly. But he said that we swapped ideas, evidently. I don't remember what we talked about poetry, songs. So he wrote a song called To Beat the Devil, about me. I'm the man in the bar in the song, and he's the songwriter that comes in.
So I fooled around with some exotic echoes and equalization, and got him to sounding really good to me in the control room, and then we ran it down, and I taped it, and I cranked the volume almost to the max, because you can make almost anything sound good if you play it loud enough, And then I pulled his voice out well above the track, and here was all this echo booming, and these gigantic speakers, and he came in, and when it hit, he fell back. He said, Jesus, is that me? I said, that's you. He said, well, fuck, let's cut.
This is To Beat the Devil. It was wintertime in Nashville, down on Music City Road. I was looking for a place to get myself out of the cold, to warm the frozen feeling that was eating at my soul, keep the chilly wind off of my guitar. My thirsty wanted whiskey and my hungry needed beans, but it'd been a month of paydays since I'd heard Ed Eagle scream. So with a stomach full of empty and a pocket full of greens, I left my pride and stepped inside a bar. Actually, I guess you'd call it a tavern. Cigarette smoke to the ceiling and sawdust on the floor. Friendly shadows. I saw that there was just one old man sitting at the bar. In the mirror, I could see him checking me and my guitar. And he turned and said, "Come up here, boy. Show us what you are." I said, "I'm dry." He bought me a beer. He nodded at my guitar and said, "It's a tough life, ain't it?" I just looked at him. He said, "You ain't making any money, are you?" I said, "You've been reading my mail." He just smiled and said, "Let me see that guitar. I got something you ought to hear." Then he laid it on me.
If you waste your time talking to the people who don't listen to the things that you are saying, who do you think's gonna hear? And if you should die explaining how the things that they complain about are things they could be changing, who do you think's gonna care? There's a world of lonely singers in a world turned deaf and blind, who were crucified for what they tried to show. And their voices still are ringing through the swirling sands of time, 'cause they don't believe that no one wants to know. Well, the old man was a stranger, but I'd heard his song before. Back when trouble had me locked out on the wrong side of the door. When nothing stood behind me but my shadow on the floor. And lonesome was more than a state of mind.
You see, the devil haunts a hungry man. And if you don't want to join him, you gotta beat him. I ain't saying I beat the devil, but I drank his beer for nothing. Then I stole his song. And you still can hear me singing to the people who don't listen to the things that I'm saying, praying someone's gonna hear. I guess I'll die explaining how the things that they complain about are things they could be changing, hoping someone's gonna care.
During the time we were starting to record, you know, Ronnie Hawkins was on the label. Great rock and roller out of Arkansas originally, but's lived in Canada for years. And he's huge in Canada. Works mainly the big clubs on Yonge Street in Toronto, but once a year he takes a hiatus and does a tour of one-nighters across Canada. So he called me one day and he said, he calls me Sir Frederick. I never have figured that out. But he says, "Sir Frederick, I need an opening act. I'm going on the road." And I said, "Well, I've got this fella here that we just started an album with. Nothing's out yet, but he's a great writer." "Well, he's not too good on stage, is he?" I said, "Well, I wouldn't think so. He hasn't had any experience." He said, "Perfect. What's his name?" I said, "Kris Kristofferson." "Kris Kristofferson, what kind of name is that?" I said, "No, it's Kristofferson." Well, he never has gotten it right. It's still Kristofferson to Ronnie. But anyway, he hired him at $250 a night, I believe, in expenses. Thrilled Kris to death, you know, because he hadn't had any gigs like that. So he went up there, and Ronnie called me in 3 or 4 days, and he said, "Sir Frederick, what have you done to me? What have you sent me?" And I said, "What do you mean? What's wrong?" He said, "This guy's taken every girlfriend I ever had. He's even after my wife." And I said, "No, he's not. He wouldn't do that." He said, "Well, now, he ain't exactly after them. I mean, they're all after him. And I can't figure out what it is. I don't ever hear him say anything. But if he keeps this up, I'm going to get even with him." So a couple of days later, he called me and he said, "I've decided to bring in the heavy artillery." And there was this girl from Arkansas that was an exquisitely beautiful woman, and who, by Ronnie's account, had broken spiritually, physically, and financially. 4 millionaires by the time she's 21. Well, he flew her in to sick her on Kris, see. And they had a break in their tour about that time, and they came to Ronnie's house out in the suburb of Toronto there. And back of Ronnie's house was a recreated cabin of the 1700s. There's beautiful big balsam logs and huge fireplace and a loft. Rope bunks with buffalo hides. So they had a party that night, the first night of the break from the tour, and it started snowing. So it worked out just perfectly, like Ronnie had planned this thing, you know, and made a pact to get snow in at the right time, the whole deal. He said, Kris, I've got you staying out in the cabin, but now, honey, you can, he says to the girl, you can stay here in the house with Wanda and me. And she said, if you don't mind, I'll just stay out in the cabin with Kris. He said, oh, no, I wouldn't want you to do that. You don't have to do that. And Kris said, that's okay. So they go out there, and it snowed 30-some-odd inches. It was a huge blizzard. They had to postpone their tour for a time. But Ronnie called me, and he said, I'm really worried. I think she's killed him. I haven't seen any sign of life out there in 3 days. And the snow's so deep, I can't get out there. It's like 4 or 5 feet deep. I got this piece of equipment supposed to come in a day or two and clear me a path, you know. And I'll check on it, but I swear I'm worried, man. I said, you better not have done anything like this, you know, because I've got a lot of faith and hope in Kris and a big investment. I mean, you know. And he said, well, man, I'm sorry, you know, I don't know. So he called me the next day, I guess it was, and he said the machine had cleared the path, and he was getting ready to go out there when Kris came bouncing into the kitchen and said, where's the juice and the bacon and the eggs and stuff? We're out of food. So he looked like he'd been laying on the beach in Puerto Rico for a month, resting. So an hour or so later, they both came in, and he said, holy smokes, son. My heavy artillery, wasn't even a pop gun, said, looked like she'd been gang-banged by communist China. Hickey marks had hickey marks, and she's in love and wants to move to Nashville. He said, man, I'm going to find out what this cat has. So they went to a party in the night or two, and he said, now, I want to tell you something. He called me, and he said, I want to tell you something. I'm going to stay so close to him tonight that if I have to pee, it'll wet his leg. And I'll find out what he does. She called me the next day and said, he doesn't do anything. Nothing. He just stands around, and he said they just come after him. I never saw anything like it. I said, well, he's going to be a big success, you know, because if women think that way about him, they buy the records. He said, you're right. He's going to be a monster.
He wrote a lot about sex. It seems like a lot of Kris's songs had to do with the bedroom. And this was one of the first times that direct of an approach had been made in Nashville. So this raised a few eyebrows, I think, but it also sold some records.
God, this was back in in the 50s and the early 60s. Pop music was singing that doggy in the window, you know, and little rhyming songs that didn't mean nothing, you know, and country music at the same time was talking about infidelity, talking about guys who went to the bar and cheated on their wives, or wives who cheated on their husbands, or real stuff, you know. And I felt that I was just following in the tradition for something like Help Me Make It Through Tonight. You know, I didn't feel like that I was bringing sex to country music. I think sex was there.
He celebrates love and sex and beauty in his songs. Some of his songs are really spiritual in nature, that they just take you on a higher plane.
Lay your head upon my pillow. Hold your warm and tender body close to mine. Hear the whisper of the raindrops blowing soft against the window. Make believe you love me one more time. For the good time, I'll get along. You'll find another, and I'll be here if you should find you ever need me. Don't say a word about tomorrow or forever. There'll be time enough for sadness when you leave me. Lay your head upon my pillow. Hold your warm and tender body close to mine. Hear the whisper of the raindrops blowing soft against the window, and make believe you love me one more time for the good time.
Sometimes a song will start just from a line that will lead to other lines, you know. But the best for me is when you have the whole feeling of the song that you want, like in For the Good Times, where there's a unity to it, you know, that it works out naturally from what it's about. Ideally, you would get the tagline first, the line that says what the song's about. But it doesn't always happen.
You think about the way Indian people speak and the simplicity with which they express their ideas. And then you look at, you know, Gary Cooper and John Wayne and Kris Kristofferson and Willie Nelson. These people there's a Western way of speaking, of saying things simply and powerfully. And that resides right there in his songwriting.
Take the ribbon from your hair, shake it loose, let it fall, laying soft against my skin, like the shadows on the wall. Come and lay down by my side till the early morning light. All I'm taking is your time. Help me make it through the night. I don't care what's right or wrong. I don't try to understand. Let the devil take tomorrow. Lord, tonight I need a friend. 'Cause yesterday is dead and gone, and tomorrow's out of sight. Thank God. And it's bad to be alone. Help me make it through the night. Help me make it through the night. Some things never change.
I think Kris has changed country music a lot in that he's made other songwriters sit up and pay attention, and made some of them really work at their art rather than just rhyming words and using catchphrases and cliches. I know he did that to me. You know, he made me want to write better songs.
I feel a very real debt to Nashville, because I think Nashville saved my life at a time when I needed it saving. It was a place where I could fall in love with the life, with the music, with everything about it, and commit myself to it 100%, 24 hours a day.
He'll be remembered as a Nashville writer, especially in Nashville. One of the greats, just like Hank Williams, Harlan Howard, Hank Cochran. He'll definitely always be remembered as one of the great songwriters in Nashville.
Tell them that the pride of just the other side of nowhere coming home. I've got a mind to see that white line between my heart and home.
sick of spending Sundays wishing it was Mondays, sitting in the park alone. So give my best to anyone who's left me any other loving way but wrong, and tell them that the pride of just the other side of nowhere going home.
It's funny because I hadn't been on the road then when I wrote that song. I guess that's where I wanted to go. It's like Willie said, be careful what you dream. Soon your dreams will be dreaming you. But I love the road. I love the road.
Time when we were coming out of the 60s into the 70s, but the idea of the artist having to be the tragic figure, the drunk, the alcoholic, the drug addict, the tortured person writing the tortured songs, playing the guitar, playing the trumpet, playing jazz, acting, painting, cutting one's ear off. I mean, the Van Gogh syndrome, that whole kind of passion of the suicide, every moment, you know, you're not going to live to the next, the Baudelaire, Rimbaud, Verlaine, you know, that whole tragic kind of, you have to suffer, you have to be an alcoholic, you have to be a drug addict, you have to die young.
I spent a lot of time in those days trying to talk to people who happened to be using a drug that I didn't believe in. You know, I was using my own. God, I smoked so much and drank so much and everything so much. But at the time, the people who I knew who had died of heroin, and I was pretty intolerant of its use.
I'm very happy about being alive, actually. But God knows I sure tried to be on the other side of it. When I think of Janis and Hendrix and Dean and so on, I don't think of people that wanted to die. I think of people that wanted desperately to live. Desperately to live. And if they'd been asked 5 minutes before they died if they wanted to die or thought they were going to die, they would have said, absolutely not. I'm just getting a little higher, or I'm just driving a little faster, and I'm, you know, this is, you know, I'm for life, you know, this is just a little thing I'm going through here. And you know, that one day you wake up and you're Kris Kristofferson or Dennis Hopper and you've actually survived, there's no reason that one should die and the other should live, really, very honestly, because we both pushed it to as far as we possibly could.
A whole lot of people who were full of a lot of great feelings and great human love died because of the chemicals, you know, that they rightly or wrongly used, you know, to push them wherever they wanted to be artistically, you know. It was very sad if it was somebody that you loved, like Janis, you know.
I was with him when Janice died. He was completely knocked off his feet, you know. I mean, not in a very good way. So maybe, you know, maybe identifying with all her drinking probably threw him a little bit, too, aside from caring about her.
Freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose. Nothing, don't mean nothing, honey, if it ain't free. Yeah, feeling good was easy, love, when he sang the blues. You know, feeling good was good enough for me. Good enough for me and my Bobby.
A lot of times I'm thinking, wonder what he felt. I made it somehow or other manage to not feel much, you know, about the deaths. I sort of disconnect myself from it. So I was surprised when Kris just was torn apart.
Do you, in a sense, feel responsible for her death? In the sense, not that directly, but just that...
Not even remotely.
That you might have been able to help more?
No. I don't, I know enough about abuse of...
I didn't mean to throw you by that.
No, I'll address it. But I have never felt a responsibility of it. I felt sadness, but I know enough about the power of loneliness and depression to know that you got to kill your own snakes, you know, that other people can't do it. It took me about a year before I could listen to the song, to listen to the record. Because it was, I don't know, I felt, I wished, I just felt bad about having a hit record that she could enjoy, you know. But I don't feel bad about it being identified with her. Guys ask me all the time and say, hey, did you write that song for Janice? Or did Janice write that song? You know, and God, to be linked with Janice's memory, to me, is an honor. Sam was an old myth maker. He made movies like the old guys, you know, like John Huston and Ford. Those are the giants.
Sam was kind of like Thoreau in my idea, and he went with the idea that beware of enterprises that require new clothing, you know. And he was just his own person. He didn't dress up for anybody in any way. Sam always had trouble with the studios. Kris, on the other hand, he was always a hired hand, came in, did his thing, and left.
We were both drunks. God, he loved Sunday morning coming down, just like an old drunk, you know. And we made the same kind of mistakes of irrational anger, hitting the wrong targets, but trying to live up to what we believe we should do.
Basically, they were the same person, and they respected one another for that reason. You know, Sam didn't roll over for anybody, and Kris doesn't either.
I think somewhere, Sam and I went to the same school back in, probably back in the days when you were brought up, you know, believing a lot of things that are probably not even crossing people's minds today. Young kids, you know, we were brought up with ideas of what America stood for. You know, and freedom and justice for everybody, you know, and sticking up for the underdog. And it's been a long time since America stood for that, really, you know, in the eyes of everybody around the world. In Billy the Kid, he was Pat Garrett, and he was Billy the Kid. I think his heart was with the kid because Garrett represented the rational side, you know, the common sense, law and order, all those bastards who had sold out and become part of the prison. part of the system instead of the free spirit, which Sam was.
All right, kid. Come on out of here, still alive. Game's over. Coming out, Pat.
You're poor company, Pat.
Yeah, I'm alive, though.
So am I. Billy was everything that Sam loved. He was wild, he was free, he was happy, he was good-looking, he was a charmer. Of course, he hated the old guy in Sam, and he loved the young guy in Sam. He didn't ever want to grow old.
He was our hero, boys, he took the bullet. He went down swinging his fist from the floor. You can ask any working girl south of the border. Sam Peckinpah era un hombre for sure. I said, Willie, oh buddy, please tell me again the reason to keep going on. He said, there's no harder words to say over a friend, and they done you so righteously wrong. They stopped you from singing your song. But not me.
He and Willie were doing a performance, and it was the day after they buried Peckinpah. And there was a star-studded audience, and Kris, instead of coming out and singing his hits, first thing he did was chew out Hollywood from the front row back. Just say, how dare you do this to Sam Peckinpah? How dare you turn your back on him, and just ream them. And then you could, because I knew the band fairly well at the time, you could see him calling an audible and singing songs they had no idea he was going to sing. And it was a terrific statement, both about Peckinpah, Hollywood, and Kris's loyalty and conviction.
When I was fighting in the Golden Gloves back in Los Angeles, and I hadn't really trained, and I'd sweated off 15 pounds to be a welterweight, and was lucky enough to knock out the first guy that I fought immediately before my deficiencies were exposed, you know, and it got, the picture of the knockout was on the front page of the LA Examiner, with this guy's face pushed out to here, and it was one of these pictures that traveled all over the country, you know. So the next thing you know, I was famous. Then the next fight, there was this little guy. His name Carlton Ames. He looked half a foot shorter than me. And we were in the dressing room. I was kind of sleeping on a couch, trying to sleep on it. He was on 2 wooden chairs. He was sleeping on them. That's how tough he was. And he beat me from the first punch of the first exchange of the fight. He hit me with something so hard in the stomach. It was either a liver punch or something, but it paralyzed me. He had me knock me down in every round, but the thing that was embarrassing was that I gave up. When I thought, well, if this guy can beat me, I'll never be the champion, you know. And I just took the beating.
His face is his history. And he's done and seen more things than most of us will ever. And that shows up, I think. You know, I mean, acting, Hollywood pays its actors a lot of money to react, basically. And there's a lot of technique. I'm never really interested in performance, per se. It's behavior that I think is what's always interesting. And I think Kris, he would probably admit this. I mean, his range is who he is.
I don't think we would buy him as a cowardly villain or something. Kris, and we don't want to. I mean, there's Eastwood and the rest of these guys, but Kris seems to be the real thing to me. I mean, when I'm choosing up sides in a bar fight, he'd make my first call.
I was sitting in the audience watching another fight, a later fight, and this little Mexican kid come up and sat next to me. He was a fighter. And he said, "How you feeling, you know?" And I said, "Well, you know, I feel pretty stupid." He says, "You know, a Mexican kid," he says, "he will never give up." He said, he said, if the man's 10 times as big as he is and 10 times as strong, he'll never stop punching him. You watch a Mexican fighter, and I've watched him since, and he's right. It's true. But it taught me immediately that victory wasn't in the decision at the end. The victory was in that the going for it was in never stopping. Well, that saved me. From then on, there's no way you can lose.
In mind, which was a film that was not supposed to be real in any sense other than emotionally. And I said, geez, I really want to get somebody, the character is an ex-cop, ex-con, you know, a legendary guy. I said, I want to get somebody who the audience looks at as something other than a performance. There's really something else there. And I never thought of anyone other than Kris. His ability as an actor, he understands it all. But what's really smart about him, he understands what he is good at and what he can do. So he's staging a scene, and ultimately you realize that, unbeknownst to even the person who's staging it, you're staging around what Kris is comfortable with and what his strengths are. And he's got a terrific range, but he doesn't have to do a lot to be effective. And I saw that in many, many scenes in Trouble in Mind, especially, where as the camera got closer, the movie got better.
What do you think I am, Georgia?
I think you're a good man who's had bad luck. And I think all that can change. Luck, I mean.
Okay, listen to me. I'll help you out. I'll save that poor son of a bitch, but you owe me something I want. And I just spent too many years wanting and never having. So once I fix this up and send him on his way, you belong to me. Completely. You'll live with me. And I'll take care of you and the kid, and we'll have something. Otherwise, let him get what he deserves. Let everybody get what they deserve.
Kris had met Barbra Streisand, and they had decided that they were going to make a movie together, and the movie ultimately turned out to be The Star Is Born. Kris had gone back to Nashville, and it had been in the papers, that an item in the papers linking Kris with Barbra Streisand. And Johnny Cash's reaction to it was to sidle up to Kris and say, well, we're shitting in the tall cotton now, aren't we, son?
As The Star Is Born came out, they called me, asked me if I'd do the picture, because, number one, I knew Kris, and yeah, they needed somebody to hang, so I did. We had a great time. Great time. Because he was supposed to be loaded, so we were loaded.
Was that the time that you kind of stopped drinking? And
Yeah, that's when
your life?
It turned it around, you know, but I didn't suddenly turn into a saint, but definitely put me on the road to recovery. And I probably wouldn't be sitting here today if I was still the guy I was when I started making that film.
Kris was the kind of drunk who, if he drank till 1 or 2, see, he could run 5 miles up the side of his mountain, and he did it every morning. That's why he always stayed in shape. He didn't look as though he drunk anything.
I think there's no doubt that alcohol will eventually get you leading to the darker side. The only times that I have ever felt
despair in such a way as to consider checking out has been when I was, heavily drinking. I'm talking about a couple of bottles of whiskey a day. And I think there's evidence, that a lot of people who did themselves in, like Hemingway, did it because it leads you to look at the dark side of things.
There were days when Kris would fall, as he called it, into his descend, into his Lincoln-esque black moods. And they were very black and very Lincoln-esque. And there were days when one could almost not talk to him. He was literally at the bottom of the well. And one had to find a way to pull him back up to where he could even speak. And what my job became on those days was to find a way of getting him to use that as much as possible and to use what he was feeling to feed the work. A lot of the agony that you see on the screen, a lot of the pain that you see on the screen is quite real. It's something beyond acting.
It was probably the hardest part of my life. I thought I'd lost my entire family, and I didn't understand why. And particularly bothered me losing my little girl. It turned out I didn't lose her. I ended up being a bachelor daddy, but that was a rough summer. It was a rough summer. But it's interesting that Michael said that's what he wanted. I'm glad it's what he wanted, because I was afraid that I'd overdone it. The character that I was playing represented America. But the interesting thing is that nobody ever discussed what it was about. It was a political message that was very unpopular in 1980 when the Reagan administration was beginning. And it was a pretty unusually harsh way of referring to a president in an American film, like when Chris Walken says, "Fuck him too." And when the bad guys were the American cavalry coming in to rescue the mercenaries, and the mercenaries came to resemble the Contras, who we were training to overthrow the Sandinista government. The president of Cimino's company said on the morning his film premiered in Cannes that unless control got out of the hands of the creative people, the industry was headed for disaster. I later asked him who he would give it to, the uncreative people, and his lawyer piped up that I should pay for the next one. And I said, was it your money? It's a crazy game. When we got back to LA, there was a guy meeting us at the airport from UA, telling us not to talk to anyone. And out of loyalty to Michael, I didn't, and nobody else did either. I think that there were a lot of people out there that wrote vicious reviews, finding the film absolutely unredeemed, that were bought by the very people. I told Michael, I said, you realize the guys that got you, and they got him, were the same guys you were writing about. The same guys the movie was about. It was about the people who believed that money was more important than people. The fact is, it was a political assassination.
Damn you!
If you're responsible indirectly by supporting with your money and your silence something brutal that's going on, that's important to know. That's part of your life. That's not just what dipshit's gonna run for office, you know. It's and it can be costly, particularly in L.A. in the movie business, you know. I found considerable lack of work after doing concerts for the Palestinian children and for a couple of the gigs with Vanessa Redgrave. And if that's the way it has to be, that's the way it has to be. Because if you support human rights, you got to support them everywhere.
I was trying to get him to do a benefit for Cesar Chavez and the farm workers. And the reaction was something like this. What? Who the hell's that? And I said, oh, you know, just, he said he didn't want to do that kind of stuff or something, and he didn't know what I was talking about. And I said, you know, the farm workers, they're getting a pretty bum rap, and they're getting a bum deal. And he said, oh, you mean the Mexicans? I said, yeah, the Mexicans. Oh, shit, yeah, I'll do it for the Mexicans. And that's where the level of political consciousness was at one stage.
Well, I'm a migratory worker myself, and having had the experiences of the abuses and the exploitation and the dangers to the workers because of the environment, pesticides, and so forth, I decided to try and form a union where everybody had failed. We get called from time to time by famous people and people in show business and so forth. And, you know, oftentimes they don't really mean it. They're good meaning, and they mean it, but they're too busy to do anything about it. And so we thought Kris was just one of those. We treated him very nicely, but we didn't ever imagine that he was really deeply concerned about what was happening to us, to workers, and how we saw that our movement was a way to help. But in time, it began to show that it was for real. And pretty amazing. It's steadfast, I guess the word. The concern and the commitment, it's always there.
We should be aware that we're supporting an organization that's like the KGB, you know? If the CIA can overthrow more than 30 democratically elected governments in the time since they were created, and the National Security Council was created, then something's wrong.
People who are actors and with talent and so forth are very concerned about far-off things across the world. And he's concerned about those things, but also concerned about things happening in his back door, in his backyard. And that's what's different.
Kris and Lisa had this housekeeper working at their house, and I think she was a Salvadoran woman. And they were very close with her. And one day there was a man working at their house, a Mexican man, and he hurt himself. And she went out there to bandage his leg. And they had this, they sort of shared this joke. She said something like, you know, she said something, you know, in Spanish, and he laughed. Anyway, they exchanged this. Apparently, this is a saying in El Salvador that the fire doesn't burn a bad weed, you know. And then he laughed and said, yeah, well, the Mexicans say, in Mexico we say a bad thing never dies. They were just talking about how gnarly and tough this old man was. You know, you have to go to great lengths to extinguish, you know, this old weed. So anyway, Kris wrote a song about it. It's a great song. Mr. Money Man, I know you've had your way, and I know the way you're winning. And the bloody hand you're holding ain't no bargain at the price you've had to pay. You have stolen all the land that you could steal, and you've killed so many heroes. But the dreams they left behind them aren't as easy as a man to blow away. And they say al mal secate, y el fuego lo quema. Y los mexicanos dicen cosa mala nunca muere, don't you know?
We have an extremely bad problem with the use of pesticides that are causing cancer in the children, birth defects, and now a new epidemic of kids, babies being born with the brain not being formed completely. Death to the workers by poisoning, instant death. 85% of the workforce has some kind of skin disease because of pesticides. Widespread psychological terror on the workers. If you say union, you get fired. If you wear a button, you get suspended. If you get seen talking to the wrong people in town, might be your job, and also your wife and your children. You may lose your house. They do that to keep them controlled. And I call that, it's terror. They have, to keep them getting wages, to keep them collecting the wages sometimes, a whole unchecked system of sexual harassment on young women. If they want to keep their jobs, they have to go out with them, have to live with them, they have to sleep with them, with the foremen, the labor contractors. They prey on all these defenseless people who are immigrants, don't know the language, they don't know their rights, they don't have a job, and a job is more important than to have a job, and where they're willing to put up with unbelievable conditions and demands made on them to be able to have a job, to be able to get a little bit of money to send back home where they came from. It's unbelievable. And this is what happens.
I talked to soldiers down in Managua, ex-soldiers who are, these veterans for peace now, and they were down in Nicaragua for the same reason they volunteered for Vietnam, was they believed in standing up for the underdog. They believed at the time that Vietnam was an underdog being bullied by a big communist China. That's what we were told when we were in the Army. Some of the best people I know are people who volunteered for Vietnam. I was totally seeing the world from the perspective of a soldier at that time. Anyway, this is I'll see if I can remember it. Said I was on leave at the time, just ducking the fog, nosing around like a hungry dog in that crazy place called Washington, D.C. I saw a crowd of people on the White House lawn all carrying signs about Vietnam, so I eased on over to see what I could see. They were a strange-looking bunch, but I never did understand civilians. A fella came to me with a list in his hand, said we were gathering names to send a telegram of sympathy. Then he handed me a pen. Said, I reckon this is going to the children and wives of my friends over there who've given their lives. He says, buddy, this is going to Ho Chi Minh. I said, Ho Chi who? He said, Ho Chi Minh, people's leader, North Vietnam. Well, I wasn't real sure that I was hearing him right, but I thought we'd better move before we got in a fight, because my eyes were smarting and my pulse started hitting a lick. And I thought about another telegram I'd read telling my buddy's wife that her husband was dead, and it wasn't too long till I was feeling downright sick. Another held a sign that said, we won't fight. And I thought to myself, you got that right. You'd rather let a soldier die instead. I said, you ever stop to think that every man who died there in that far-off land was dying so that you won't wake up dead? I can't hardly say the line right now. Of course, he looked at me like I was crazy. Just another warmonger. My attitude toward Vietnam today is 180 degrees different, We killed 2 million Vietnamese, as well as killing 56,000 Americans. We did worse than that, though. I think we killed, for a lot of Americans, the notion that America stands for liberty and justice for everybody. it's up to anybody who does have the information to try to pass it on.
The public believes in more than the politicians. See, he has a way of doing things and saying things, even in his own act, when he's in a performance. He will bring in something that he's concerned about that has nothing to do with performance, but has to do with human beings suffering and so forth, an issue, and brings it in, has a perfect way of making it part of what he's doing.
Loaded down with lessons that he carried home from Vietnam to Wounded Knee. Johnny Lobo burned a flag he knew had been dishonored, paid the price for thinking he was free. Someone set his house afire, burned it to the ground, with his wife and children locked inside. Later, when the bitter tears were falling to the ashes, something good in Johnny Lobo died.
He deals a lot with themes of freedom and individuality. 100 years ago, he'd have been a cowboy, and today he's a much more articulate advocate of the on-the-road philosophy than Jack Kerouac. And his choice of images, the train, the freedom, the simple, earthly pleasures, and an ability to take care of yourself on a basic level. These are the things that all men aspire to. So I think men want to be him. I think he represents a certain ideal. He's really got it all covered, he's an athlete, a former boxer. He's lived an adventurous life as a helicopter pilot, and just all these romantic images of freedom. I mean, isn't that at the core? Isn't that what everybody wants, is to live the life that they choose, to have the courage to do that, and to do it competently. And that's the other thing. He moves with grace, and you sense that he's not abusing this freedom, that he savors, just like just something simple like the harmonica.
You gave me back my soul again by showing me the laughter and the wonder in your eyes. Save me from the shuttered man I used to be. Opened up the windows of my life, and the happiness you've given me for loving you is sweeter love and deeper every day. I can't stop the changes that you're growing through, or someone new from stealing you away. So darling, when it's time, you can spread your wings, and I'll set you free to fly away. And it's okay, 'cause darling, time changes everything, but it won't change me. I love you, oh, I love you. inside of me, you'll always be my Valentine. I pray your freedom makes your dreams come true. As long as there's a heartbeat in this soul of mine, you'll know there's someone so in love with you. So darling, when it's time, you can spread your wings and I'll set you free to fly away. And it's okay, 'cause darling, time changes everything, but it won't change me. I love you, oh, I love you.
What happens, what may be happening to me is through the love of my children, I'm learning how to love older people too. You know, it's The Promise started out for my kids. Started out I was writing about Casey, and then it come to be all my kids. And then it came to be, when I sing it now, I say it's for the mamas too. And it's anything that you love with absolutely no strings. You know, my kids can do whatever they want to. They're absolutely free for me, because my love is unconditional.
Well, of course, with Kris and with myself and a lot of other writers who've lived any length of time, we seem to have picked up several folks along the way that we write about. We write about our ex-wives and our girlfriends and our children, so there's a lot of subject matter here to write about, and Kris seems to be writing about it all now, and that's good.
Something's working. I've been married for 10 years. That's a record for me. And either age or AIDS or something has allowed me to understand what being faithful meant, you know. My life's damn near normal now.
Look at that old photograph. Is it really you? Smiling like a baby full of dreams. Smiling ain't so easy now. Some are coming true. Nothing simple as it seems. But I guess you count your blessings with the problem that you're dealing with today. Like the changing of the season. Ain't you come along?